All right, so you were talking about how your life has changed before and after 9/11. I didn't feel like you had the full opportunity to do it before, so I'm going to ask you to talk about it now.
Yeah, it's weird. When I was immediately after 9/11, the questions were, why do they hate us? Why do they? And now it's like, why do you?
Right.
And so the they was a foreign thing. It was, people from Afghanistan, or even though that's wrong and misguided, it was still a foreign thing. Why does Al-Qaeda hate us? Why do terrorists? Why do Muslim terrorists hate us? And that's a fair question to have. I mean, that's fine. And I felt that the discourse was, despite the fact that it was right after, it was more intelligent. Now is, why do you hate us? What do you believe in?
You know what that reminds me of? Like the event we did at the library, and we spoke so eloquently. I think we spoke eloquently for a period of time. And there was that gentleman in the audience who said, really to the fact, how dare you people stand on stage and ask for equality when you're like the most evil hate mongers on the planet? And I'm sitting there going, guy, you're talking to me. Right. You're not talking to anybody else. And you're saying, why do I deserve to be as equal as you? And the guy didn't even conceive that was a racist sentiment.
When my parents actually came, they were actually recruited by the state of Illinois that needed research scientists. My dad was recruited by the Illinois Environmental Protection Agency, where he still works. And it wasn't because he had the intention to take the jobs of Americans, because they didn't have enough Americans to do those jobs. And I was born here. I was born shortly thereafter. I was born and raised here. One of the characteristics, one of the things that I think Islamophobia has succeeded in is they've succeeded in making Muslims into a gigantic monolith so that we're all the same. We're the same as someone from Saudi Arabia, the same as someone from India or Pakistan. And that's where you get comments like, well, you can build a mosque in New York and when we can build a church in Saudi Arabia. Well, I have nothing to do with Saudi Arabia. In fact, I'm an American, but I have plenty to do with New York. And so that's what...
well, it's also, it's a little absurd. Like,
yeah, it's absurd.
And I was remembering the video that, the other sides made as to why we need these anti-Sharia bills. Right. And this guy was talking about how, he has nothing against Islam or Muslims. He has this good friend who's a Pakistani Muslim, but because he doesn't believe in Sharia and he doesn't practice Sharia in his daily life, he would be at as much danger going to Pakistan as, the speaker himself, who's a Hasidic Jew or an Orthodox Jew, wears the yarmulke. And I'm thinking, okay, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. I mean, I travel to Pakistan frequently. Right. My family travels to Pakistan frequently. We've seen the churches, the synagogues. We know these people. And in my own life and my own personal and religious views, I've never really incorporated Sharia in my way of life. And you know what? I've never been killed yet. Yeah. And people know that as I walk around. So, it's just kind of based upon this mythical perception by people who've never really been in the Muslim majority world.
It's a total myth. Like, growing up, my mom never came in and said, "Do you clean your room and follow Sharia?" Right. In fact, this last year, I've probably said the word Sharia and mentioned it more times than I have in my entire life.
Well,
it wasn't even a concept.
And it was funny when we were looking for the plaintiff in Oklahoma, and even when we look for plaintiffs abroad, you can't find a Muslim American who has incorporated Sharia law into American legal documents. Like, it's crazy rare. So I guess your family did not then come here to impose Sharia law upon the United States.
They're not. And if they did, they're failing.
They're doing really badly about it.
Yeah, they're doing a very poor job. But it's such an abstract thing. Like, I went to Sunday school. I didn't have a formal Islamic education where I went to a full-time high school that was I was all Islamic or Muslim. I went to a public school. I went to Sunday school for like 2-3 hours. We would just learn the basics. And even then, Sharia was just, okay, this abstract thing, don't worry about it. It's for the scholars to figure out. It's constantly changing. What you need to worry about is the rules, how to pray, how to fast, how to treat your parents right. And so it's strange that one of the frustrating things is I feel like I have to explain things that aren't really a part of my reality anyway. Right. It doesn't mean I'm not practicing. I'm totally practicing, but still, Sharia is not the term in my mind. When I walk home after work, it's gone.
Well, because, I mean, the bills, we keep calling them anti-Sharia bills. Well, they use the word Sharia because they know that it's illegal to use the word Muslim.
Right.
You know,
exactly.
they want to just
That's the
say,
play.
you know, let's ban Islam.
Right.
You know, and I mean, we remember this, right, from some of the statements that were made in the media that we should declare a war on Islam and ban all Muslim
Right.
immigration, criminalize the practice of Islam. I mean, it's definitely a war against a people, though. Like, I don't think it's a war against religion. It's a war against a people. It's a war against immigrants. It's
Sure.
a war against people with brown skin and funny names. I mean,
Yeah.
that's what it is.
Exactly.
Yeah, and it's just really kind of sad and scary.
You made an amazing point though that the guy who authored this,
Yeah.
David Yerushalmi, he claims to his drive to do this is to protect the
Right.
Constitution in America from Sharia.
Right.
Yet he said something about the First Amendment being a problem.
Yeah, I mean, that's what's so funny. I mean, that's not his intent, right? That's the way they market themselves, to say, you know what, we really need to protect the Constitution. And, you know, you look at the APPA, the American Public Policy Alliance's webpage, you look at, you know, Rosemary Swanger's, Rep. Swanger's co-sponsorship memo, and it's all about, you know, the Constitution are the principles upon which we're founded. And then you read an article where Mr., and I always pronounce his name Yerushalmi. I can't stop myself. Because I think it should be Yerushalmi, like Jerusalem,
Let's just call him
Yerushalayim.
Dave.
Well, it seems a little disrespectful, but Mr. Yerushalmi, you know, has made statements about the fact that the model legislation is facially neutral in the hopes of avoiding the sticky problems of our First Amendment jurisprudence.
Right.
The APPA's website has said, you know what's wrong with Oklahoma? It wasn't facially neutral. And it's also, it's again another myth. I mean, that it's clearly being said by people who don't understand constitutional law jurisprudence. Because there's this really great and I think famous case from Florida from the 80s, and it's called the Church of Lukemi Babaluai versus Halea, which is very fun to say.
Right.
But it's actually about, Santeria and the practice of animal sacrifice in the Santeria Church down in Halea, Florida. And all of the memos prior to the legislation, actually the legislative intent, people were talking about this group of foreigners imposing their foreign values and customs upon, you know, Florida and ruining Florida. And then they had this very facially neutral bill that says, yeah, well, you know what, you're not allowed to kill animals, animal cruelty bill.
Right.
And the court says, yeah, you know, actually, facial neutrality doesn't save anything from constitutional muster. We actually say that bills enacted with discriminatory intent are always subject to constitutional scrutiny. The Constitution prohibits discrimination, both explicit and implicit, even well hidden, you know, so they've been very careful to say, you know, we need to word this in a way that it'll survive constitutional scrutiny, because if we acknowledge what we're doing,
Right. Then
it'll get shot
Constitution
down.
is going to say no. They subconsciously or consciously see who they really are, and project it on someone else.
Yeah.
So they are the threats to the Constitution, but they're projecting that and
Right.
extending that characteristic.
They're wrapping
to someone
themselves
else.
in the flag and saying, we are standing up for American values. We are traditional American values. And, you know, this argument has been shot down already. And, you know, I've mentioned before the Pennsylvania Constitutional Convention, where the Pennsylvania Constitution was drafted 1776, so well before, you know, the feds came out. And there was this group that says, you know what, this was a commonwealth established on Protestant values, people from Northern European stock, and we got to protect those Protestant values. Let's put in our state constitution. And they lost. They also called themselves an anti-constitutionalists, which I think is important to remember. That like they acknowledged that this was a wrong thing. Yeah, I've got to ask you though, while we've got you here and we've got the cameras rolling, you were asked how you feel about the Islamophobes, and I feel like you held yourself back.
I held myself back.
Tell us what you really think.
Well, I certainly dislike them because, you know, it's like a schoolyard fight. Well, they started it.
Yeah.
You know, they started picking on me first. But whenever I think about this, I know I'm going to repeat myself. Whenever I think about this long term, you know, they are going to be defeated, and I'm here because I want to be a part of that process.
Yeah.
I don't want to sit on the sidelines. I want them to know that they lost because of something that we had to do.
I'm not as confident as you are about their defeat or the timeliness of it. You know, we look at American history, and I think you made an excellent point. African Americans have been in the United States since 1619.
It's a long time.
You know, and have they achieved equality now, 400 years later? Like, yeah, probably not. Now, we didn't enter this country under the same circumstances, but we also did not enter the United States under the same circumstances as some of the white ethnic groups, which you see so much in literature about how, you know, the Irish Americans, the Italian Americans, the Polish Americans were assimilated. And we don't have that white privilege. We never have. Even
That's true.
persons of Middle Eastern stock who've tried to claim white privilege for themselves have never had it. And I don't think it'll take 400 years. They also don't think it'll take.
It's probably not going to be 10 or 20 years.
Yeah, and I think about, like, you know, by the time President Obama was candidate Obama, the inquiry was less. I mean, there still was an issue about, you know, his blackness, his African American identity, or his African identity. Right. And I've got to say, this guy formerly lived in West Virginia, so I remember those exit polls where people even acknowledged, you know, we're lifelong Democrats, we just can't vote for a black guy. And if that's what they're telling the pollsters, you know, it was bad. But think about how much, the bigger deal was that his middle name was Hussein. Of course, nobody mentioned the fact that his first name is Barack. Right,
which is also a Muslim name. He won't say it, but
see, maybe it's a Jewish name, which kind of tells you why
it's kind of both,
the conflict is a little mythical. The first 17 years of my life, you know, brownness was such a source of torment that I wanted more than anything to be white. I didn't want to be physically assaulted. I didn't want to be taunted. I didn't want to have to be, you know, in fear for my own safety. And then it was like, you know, I now no longer want that, but have I accidentally become it? Have I just obtained it by being around it so long? Just when it was cool to be brown, I had turned white. It was very very sad. So that was interesting. But I know coming to CAIR, and I've seen it so many times. People who I have known for a decade or longer, learning I'm Muslim, and now they can't return my calls.
I see. Yeah.
And, you know, and we've talked about this. I mean, they're people, they're elected officials who, and their first thing was like, wait, why do you care about this? Oh, you're not Muslim, are you? And now all of a sudden they're not taking the calls. And I'm thinking, you know, we work together. I taught you, you know, what a reasonable seizure is. You know, we've tried cases together. But, I mean, that hate is, you know, it's much.
It's going to last long.
And it's much more prevalent than people think. It's very mainstream. It's accepted. And you mentioned LGBT equality, because I think about my background working in that field. And, you know, 30 years ago it was very mainstream to hate gays. Now you're a social pariah. You know, you're an outcast if you do that. And it's still very mainstream, and you win public approval and public support by hating Muslims. I want to get to that place where people realize this is not okay.
Exactly. I think we might get there in 20 to 30 years, but the actual effects of the products of Islamophobia are going to last long.
Right.
I mean, you've got a young child. I hope to have a young child one day, and I think maybe these anti-Muslim organizations might be gone. They might be shut down. They'll be much smaller than they are now. They might even be called something else entirely. But the effects of law enforcement training, for example, think of the legacy of law enforcement in the African American community. It just doesn't end. It doesn't change.
It won't go away.
And you know, the fact is, a lot of cops might not be racist now, but a
lot of cops may not recognize.
Right, but that psyche and legacy has lasted. And I think, you know, from you know, if I have a child growing up, is he or she going to have experiences from not just police, but FBI, airport security, things like that? Is that a permanent institutionalized thing? And is this going to be a generational product that keeps going on? You know. Okay.
So. I think it will. And actually, you know, just you mentioned my child, and you know, it's really funny. So, you know, my daughter, of course, is 4, and you know, you've seen her. She, you know, my daughter, very fair-skinned, the blue-green eyes, all of that, and yet she has such a strong self-identity of being brown.
Oh, really?
That, you know, because she always talks about this. Like, she'll color herself with a brown crayon. She says, so-and-so's white, Mommy and Layla are brown. You know, it's one of those things. So that is her identity now. She will remember that. Even after these institutions have gone away, she'll remember that experience. Like, I tell people, you know, before I could walk, before I could read and write, I knew I was brown. It was my first way of recognizing myself. Before I knew my name was Amara, I knew I was brown. And I remember being picked on in preschool. Like, I was 3, and I knew it was because I was brown.
Yeah.
You know, and, you know, that won't go away in her generation's lifetime. So, you know, the legacy of this will outlive the hate. I think we were given the signal. So, any parting moments?
No, I mean,
Thoughts?
you mentioned preschool, and when you're a kid, you don't realize people are racist because you don't think of evil things when you're a kid. But when you get older and you think back to preschool, I remember, like, I would sit in a corner and my teachers would be like, oh, whatever, he's just there. And I realized it was probably because, you know, they...
But that's just the thing, like, my first thought at 3 was, oh, it's because I'm brown.
Yeah.
That's why this kid's being mean to me. Like, think about the amount of conditioning you have to be a 3-year-old.
To be a 3-year-old.
To have that concept of the world. It's the world hates brownness. I am brown.
Right.
I'm the outsider. Like.